There's an impulse we all have to want to understand the ultimate source of our suffering. And this is, of course, an understandable impulse. And I'm not here to advocate against wanting to understand the source of our suffering. After all, if we can get to the root cause and address it there, why shouldn't we go for it? This is why in the past I have often talked about fixations and that our suffering can always inevitably be traced back to the fixations we have. I like this concept of fixations because it makes clear that it is not what we are experiencing that makes us suffer, but it is rather how we are relating to our experience that makes us suffer. In other words, it's never the content of our experience that makes us suffer, but it's always the fixation we have on that content. And the implication of this is that completeness is always accessible, no matter what we are experiencing. And it therefore seems quite natural that we would place a lot of emphasis on wanting to dissolve these fixations. And very often people will even go beyond trying to dissolve fixations in the moment, and they instead worry about all the fixations that somehow lie dormant somewhere in their body-mind. They therefore go fixation hunting and try to eradicate all possible fixations. And the desire to become free of fixations, therefore, just becomes another fixation. And there are several problems with this kind of approach. For one, we're having a basic misunderstanding about what a fixation even is in the first place. We very often imagine that a fixation is some kind of subtle energetic contraction. And therefore, whenever we experience something challenging or difficult, and there is a felt contraction around that experience, we assume that this is a fixation. And we then also believe that because this fixation is present, we cannot access completeness. And this means that we have fallen, without knowing it, back into this old belief of thinking that the content of our experience is the problem. We have just shifted to believing that this contracted part of our experience is now the problem. It is therefore important to emphasize that fixation does not imply any change in terms of the content of what we are experiencing. A fixation, instead, is something very subtle and strange. It is an invisible immersion of awareness into experience. It is the taking of a position in awareness without that position actually being findable. It is a contentless, invisible identification. And we can never actually find the fixation in of itself in our experience. Which already shows us, of course, that hunting for fixations is quite senseless. We are essentially hunting for an invisible, ungraspable object. However, we can know that a fixation is present when it happens to land on an uncomfortable thought or emotion. Because when that happens, we suffer. Very often that invisible fixation will seem to substantiate a part of our experience, and the fixation therefore seems to take the shape of a contraction. When that fixation is not present, however, that does not mean that the contraction in of itself immediately dissolves. Even though it is no longer being substantiated through that fixation, it can still stay there for a while. It can still present itself exactly as it is. This should make it clear that the desire to be free of all fixations is quite unhelpful. All that has happened is that we have immersed ourselves into the belief that some experiences that arise are inherently problematic. We believe, therefore, that something needs to change in order for us to be complete right here, right now. And of course, this is simply not the case. If completeness has no requirements, why would we wish to be free of fixations at some point in the future? There is no need to dream of a state that is free of fixations. That state is here right now. Is a fixation happening for you right now? If that's the case, then we can simply become aware of that fixation and relax out of it. There is no need to hurry or desire to accomplish anything. Fixations may arise and dissolve for eternity, but if there is no fixation present here right now, what is there to fix? We never need to look for the final resolution to our fixations. What is there to eradicate? What need is there to try to become free? This completeness is already here. It is not something that can be gained, nor is it something that can be lost. Simply put, nothing is required. So just enjoy the completeness that is here right now.